I think Passover this year is crying out for its own playlist. And that's easier said than done because in truth, there's a little bit more great classical music that celebrates Easter than Passover. Never mind. I think that as we prepare the chopped chicken liver and we're making haroset and we're getting the brisket ready, we need some great music to go into this unleavened week together. So here's a very short list of some music that fits the moment, and I hope you enjoy it. And the first piece on the list is the only one that actually was written specifically for Passover. It's called the Bitter Herbs Cantata, and it was written by the Viennese composer Ernst Toch, who was a fascinating figure, a major figure in Viennese musical circles, also known as a virtuosic pianist, very prolific, and very well respected in all of Europe and certainly in Austria. But with the rise of the Nazis, he fled first to Paris and London and then to the United States, to New York, and eventually to California. And it was in Los Angeles in 1937 that he learned of the death of his mother back in Vienna. And that moment of grief ignited in him the desire to reconnect to the Jewish traditions of his youth. He had let his faith lapse. He was never that observant anyway, and he had no formal affiliation in Los Angeles with any synagogue, but he reached out to a rabbi there, Jacob Sonderling, who was also an emigre. And in the process of finding himself in Judaism with this Rabbi Sonderling, he came back to an idea that he had had a few years before to write a large-scale choral symphonic work using the actual Haggadah as the explicit text. The Haggadah, of course, is the story, the telling of the Exodus from Egypt that we read at the Seder every Passover. And you will listen in this work to some very compelling, some very emotionally direct music. Start with the fourth movement, the 10 Plagues, and you'll see what I mean. What's interesting about this piece is that Toch was not trying just to write religious music or music that celebrates one holiday, especially in the context of the times and what was happening around the world. He wanted to make a broader universal statement about freedom, about finding a way out of subjugation and equality. The next two pieces on the list were written by undisputed masters, neither of them Jewish, but I think we're in safe territory if we stick to the Old Testament. The first is Israel and Egypt by George Friedrich Handel. Like many of Handel's oratorios, based on Old Testament stories, but in this case, the text is taken directly in English from the book of Exodus and from the Psalms. And it is some of Handel's most descriptive music. Listen to the movements, "Their land brought forth frogs," or "He gave them hailstones for rain," or "He parted the Red Sea." You can tell that I'm pretty focused on the plagues and all of that today. But you hear in this music so much descriptive imagery, which fits the text perfectly. This piece is also unusual in Handel's output because he doesn't use a lot of arias to advance the story, but relies rather on choruses and double choruses. And so the effect is monumental, magisterial, and wonderful. When it was premiered in 1738 in England, it was not received all that well. But Handel made some changes to it, and even though he didn't hear it again in his lifetime, we now consider it a masterpiece. Jump forward more than 100 years to Felix Mendelssohn, who knew a lot about Baroque music. Remember, we credit Mendelssohn for having revived interest in Johann Sebastian Bach. And Mendelssohn's 1846 oratorio, Elijah, is again written by a German master in English and uses the actual texts from Exodus and from the Psalms. This is some of Mendelssohn's most impressive music. And Here, between the arias and the choruses, you have some of his most extraordinary musical achievements. Why don't you start by listening to the extraordinary movement, Behold God the Lord Passed By, when in the music itself, along with the words, you can hear clearly the tempest, the earthquake, the fire, the power of Elijah's complaint against the world, and the extraordinary release that it sets up at the end of the piece. When you go to the very last chorus, it is something so uplifting and so joyous. This truly is a masterpiece and celebrates the same story that we tell about the Exodus from Egypt. And finally, my last suggestion is the most intimate little piece at all. As I said about the Toch, bitter herbs cantata at the beginning, this is more than about just one holiday. It's about the universal desire for freedom and justice. And so I point you in the direction to the spiritual, Let My People Go. There are many versions. My go-to is the recording by Paul Robeson. And it reminds us that we are all part of the same story. In this holiday season, whether it's Passover or Easter that you're celebrating, especially after this year that we have all shared together with its ups and many downs, being together in music gives us hope. I can't wait to see you at our concerts here on the Stanford Symphony Channel, and I know that music is going to bring us all back together stronger than ever. Stay safe. See you soon.